When someone speaks of conspiracy theories, a smirk often appears on faces, an instinctive reaction to explanations that diverge from the familiar and accepted. But what if these theories were more than paranoid delusions or indulgence in superstition? What if they were a faint whisper of truth beneath the deafening noise of concealment? What if they were supported by evidence, testimonies, and leaks presented at conferences and explored in documentaries, yet withheld from mainstream media so the public remains unaware that illness has become a manufactured product? Who operates behind the scenes of this industry, and why? What connects the atmosphere to seeds, chemtrails to cancer, and Monsanto to the global health crisis? What if the conspiracy theory resembles that man who warned his village of an impending storm, only to be mocked, until the cyclone arrived and turned everything upside down? Though we now live in an era of accessible information, the search for truth amidst a flood of lies and misdirection is like diving for pearls at the bottom of a river. Some questions, simple as they may seem, remain unanswered, or at best, are met with responses far more complex than the questions themselves. For instance, what do we eat? What do we breathe? And why do we suffer from sudden or chronic illnesses even as we believe ourselves to be in an age of medical and technological advancement? Why do diseases proliferate, medications fail to cure, and our immune systems quietly crumble? In the past, illness posed a constant threat to human life. This should have changed, especially given the tremendous progress medicine has made in recent decades. Yet reality suggests the opposite. Humanity's health is in alarming decline, and the catalog of diseases grows ever longer. You may be astonished to learn that, throughout history, mankind has only ever eradicated one virus, smallpox, which was officially declared extinct by the World Health Organization in the year 1980, after a global vaccination campaign that spanned many years. Though this was hailed as a historic triumph in medicine and epidemiology, it raises urgent questions about other viruses and bacterial epidemics: plague, cholera, tuberculosis, anthrax, the Spanish flu, HIV/AIDS, Ebola, avian flu, swine flu, COVID-19, and more. And what of chronic illnesses such as cancer, diabetes, asthma, Alzheimer's, epilepsy, and liver disease? The list of persistent viruses and bacteria is long, and these can reawaken or mutate at any time, growing deadlier than before. Meanwhile, a similarly extensive list of chronic diseases continues to defy medical intervention. Here emerges a deeply troubling question. Is this inability to cure simply the result of natural scientific limitations? Or is it intentional, calculated, and orchestrated? If it were merely natural, why does illness today appear not as a biological accident, but as a project, an invisible instrument to shape a world governed by transnational interests? A world where health is no longer the goal, but a tool in the hands of capitalism, draining individuals psychologically, physically, and financially to fill the coffers of pharmaceutical giants and serve the agendas of the elites who shape humanity's fate. In recent years, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become increasingly evident that the global health system does not work in the interest of the people. The World Health Organization, instead, seems to serve the agendas of the pharmaceutical conglomerates. In this entanglement of politics, economics, and strategic interests, the boundary between healing and profit becomes blurred, transforming disease in some cases into a product, marketable, manageable, and yes, manufacturable. Otherwise, why has cancer not been eradicated despite the billions of dollars invested? Why are harmful food ingredients, which scientists have repeatedly proven dangerous, still permitted? Why is alternative and natural medicine marginalized, ridiculed, or dismissed as superstition? And why do certain outbreaks emerge at suspiciously convenient political moments? More importantly, could there exist powerful entities, armed with wealth, media influence, and cutting-edge technologies, capable of deliberately spreading disease to serve objectives ranging from profit generation to population control and socio-political manipulation? Within this context, we must consider intelligence reports, scientific research, and testimonies from within the medical establishment itself that point to systemic flaws too grave to be mere accidents or incompetence. In her seminal work, The Truth About the Drug Companies, published in 2004, Dr. Marcia Angell, an American physician and professor of social medicine at Harvard University, exposed the inner workings of the global pharmaceutical industry. Behind the closed doors of corporate giants, she revealed a world devoid of scientific ethics or humanitarian concern, governed solely by the logic of market forces and grand investment interests. These pharmaceutical companies, she wrote, deliberately conceal negative trial results that reveal a drug to be either ineffective or dangerously harmful. At the same time, they exaggerate positive outcomes by manipulating statistics or designing biased clinical trials that create the illusion of efficacy, when in reality the drug is nothing more than a commercial product. Moreover, these corporations exploit legal and regulatory loopholes to expand their influence. Rather than channeling funds into authentic medical research, they invest billions in aggressive marketing campaigns, lavish gifts and conferences to sway physicians, and manipulation of public health policy. Dr. Angell also revealed that many of the laws regulating the pharmaceutical market were crafted by lobbyists representing these very corporations, rewriting the definition of illness itself. The patient is no longer viewed as a human being to be cured, but as a long-term client to be maintained in a state of dependency, never fully healed. In this model, disease is transformed from a medical condition into a sustainable economic enterprise. Pharmaceutical companies have become instruments for reshaping human consciousness and our relationship with our bodies. These companies possess vast financial power and dominate international institutions and media networks that distract populations, keeping them in the dark about what is happening within their own physiology. It is worth noting that drug companies spend nearly 3 times as much on marketing as they do on scientific research and development. As a result, many so-called new drugs, registered with the FDA as innovative treatments, are in fact only minor variations of existing ones, repurposed within a system that turns physicians into brand ambassadors for ineffective products. These same companies also fund academic and medical journals, publishing selective findings in curated environments that reframe knowledge itself, rendering these journals marketing arms rather than neutral repositories of truth. Their financial relationships extend to universities and research institutions, where grants and honoraria buy influence and favorable coverage. All of this confirms a chilling reality. The pharmaceutical industry has evolved into a profit-driven marketing juggernaut, wielding enough power to shape research outcomes, sway doctors, compromise scientific publications, and influence regulatory agencies. Many drugs, therefore, offer no real health benefit. They are sold as commodities, marketed through sleek campaigns and carefully engineered influence. One of the most notorious examples is the Purdue Pharma scandal. In 1996, the company released OxyContin, a powerful opioid prescribed for severe and chronic pain unresponsive to conventional analgesics. Purdue deployed a vast network of influential physicians and promotional tactics, including paid seminars and sponsored travel, to convince the public that the drug was non-addictive. In time, this was revealed to be a calculated deception. Thousands became addicted to OxyContin within weeks. Some began crushing and snorting or injecting the pills, leading to an explosion in overdose deaths. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, hundreds of thousands of lives were lost to opioid overdoses, many of which began with legal prescriptions. The CDC documented that 45% of opioid addiction cases originated with an official medical prescription. By 2020, Purdue Pharma admitted before the U.S. Department of Justice to encouraging illicit drug use and deceiving public health authorities. The Sackler family, who owned the company, faced widespread moral and legal condemnation. A financial settlement exceeding $7 billion was reached. Notably, the Sacklers, an American Jewish family, were once considered among the wealthiest in the United States, with a peak net worth surpassing $13 billion. Before their fall from grace, they were celebrated patrons of the arts, donating vast sums to institutions such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Oxford University, Yale, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Notably, this medical scandal was brought to light in 2021 through an HBO documentary series titled The Crime of the Century, based on the investigative book Empire of Pain by American journalist Patrick Radden Keefe. Another illustrative case is the Tamiflu scandal. Tamiflu, the trade name for oseltamivir, was developed by Gilead Sciences and marketed globally by Roche as a treatment and preventative measure against seasonal influenza. The drug received approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in 1999 and gained widespread recognition during the 2009 swine flu pandemic, where it was touted as an effective medication capable of mitigating flu complications. However, in 2014, the Cochrane collaboration released a comprehensive review of dozens of studies, concluding that Tamiflu only reduced flu symptoms by an average of 17 hours, with no strong evidence supporting its effectiveness. Moreover, many of the drug's purported benefits lacked scientific substantiation. It was also found to have psychological and neurological side effects, particularly in children and adolescents, including hallucinations, aggressive behavior, sleep disturbances, and in some cases, suicidal thoughts. Peter Doshi, a researcher writing in the British Medical Journal, described the scandal as emblematic of how a drug can be aggressively marketed with the backing of the World Health Organization and regulatory bodies, despite the absence of compelling efficacy data. This revelation all but confirms that nothing is truly beyond the grasp of profit and commerce, not even human pain. Illness has been privatized, health reformulated as a marketable commodity, manufactured, promoted, and managed according to the logic of supply and demand, not according to ethics or human dignity. When we consider that the global pharmaceutical market now exceeds $1 trillion, we begin to understand. Illness is no longer a catastrophe. It is an opportunity. The patient is no longer a human being, but a long-term client in a business model where the measure of a drug's success is not in its healing power, but in how consistently the client remains dependent on it. This reflects a chilling new doctrine: managing illness, not curing it. Today's major health systems are operated through intricate alliances involving pharmaceutical companies, insurance brokers, and lobbying firms. These actors dictate the direction of scientific research and what treatments are approved. Meanwhile, there is a stark decline in support for preventive medicine and natural therapies. Even when such approaches are effective, they are sidelined because they do not yield high profits or create long-term customers. As a result, they are dismissed, undermined, and labeled as pseudoscience, while billion-dollar medications are marketed as modern miracles. And this manipulation extends beyond drugs. It includes medical devices, diagnostics, vaccinations, and consultations. Every step in the therapeutic journey has been transformed into a revenue stream. This commodification of human suffering is what American thinker Noam Chomsky once referred to when he said, "The worst model of savage capitalism is when the human body itself becomes a consumable object." Adding to the disturbing picture is the pharmaceutical industry's active role in disease mongering. the invention or promotion of new diseases. This term was coined by Australian journalist, physician, and researcher Ray Moynihan in 2002. An article titled "How Drug Companies Turn Us All into Patients." It refers to the exaggeration of natural symptoms or psychological states and redefining them as medical conditions requiring treatment, all to expand pharmaceutical markets. In essence, the goal is simple: convince healthy people that they are potential patients and persuade them to consume medications they never truly needed. One example is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, whose diagnostic criteria have been so broadly defined that millions of children are now labeled with the condition based on vague and subjective standards. Another is the medicalization of menopause, once a natural phase of aging, now rebranded as a condition requiring long-term hormonal therapy. A similar pattern is seen with testosterone deficiency syndrome, promoted by pharmaceutical firms as a disease, despite the fact that decreasing testosterone is a natural consequence of aging. In addition to cases such as irritable bowel syndrome, social anxiety disorder, and premenstrual symptoms, many of which are artificially constructed conditions, entirely new multi-billion-dollar markets have been created. The result is a population gripped by fear and sickness, trapped in a closed cycle of endless medications and treatments, caught in a whirlwind of anxiety and perpetual spending that flows into the coffers of power centers amassing billions under the guise of healing. In this ruthless capitalist reality, the true aim of medicine is no longer healing, but the sustainable management of illness. The objective is not for you to recover, but to remain ill for as long as possible. The goal is not to eliminate the disease, but to keep it under control. A cured patient ceases to be a customer, whereas a chronic patient represents a steady stream of income, open to expansion, adjustment, and endless monetization. Take, for instance, type 2 diabetes. Despite the availability of dietary approaches and natural treatments proven to reduce or even reverse the condition, the medical establishment continues to emphasize lifelong pharmaceuticals like metformin. These drugs do not cure diabetes, they merely regulate it. The same is true for heart disease, hypertension, depression, and even cancer. Remarkably, a century-old therapeutic breakthrough, the Rife machine, showed potential in treating cancer but was buried in obscurity. This device was explored in depth in a previous chapter on forbidden technologies. You may watch the full episode via the link in the description and the pinned comment. Within this paradigm of disease as commodity, pharmaceutical firms consistently develop medications that treat symptoms, not root causes. These drugs are then reintroduced in improved versions under the pretext of innovation at a higher price, despite bearing nearly identical chemical compositions to earlier generations. Naturally, this dynamic includes the manipulation of scientific research itself. Companies fund studies that highlight their products, while silencing or disregarding research that points to more effective or affordable alternatives. A revealing investigation published in 2010 in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine, one of the oldest and most respected medical journals, found that over 70% of pharmaceutical researchers had direct financial ties to the drug manufacturers. Leaked documents have also revealed how regulatory agencies, such as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, have been pressured to approve inadequately tested drugs or to overlook harmful side effects for commercial reasons. One of the most notorious examples is Vioxx, scientific name rofecoxib, developed and launched in 1999 by the German-American pharmaceutical conglomerate Merck for joint pain relief. Despite early studies indicating the drug doubled the risk of heart attacks and strokes, these warnings were deliberately ignored, resulting in thousands of deaths. Internal documents later revealed that some Merck scientists had concealed critical early findings to protect the company's image before regulatory bodies. This is but one case in a global pattern where medications are produced not with the goal of healing, but to serve investment agendas, treating human lives as assets in a profit pipeline that must never run dry. And as political interests align with biological laboratories, a far more disturbing question arises. Are some epidemics and diseases intentionally engineered for goals that surpass mere financial gain? Documents published on WikiLeaks have raised concerns about biological programs designed to reduce population numbers in specific regions or to conduct experiments on impoverished communities without the informed consent of those involved. Among the clearest historical examples of such medical violations is the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study, a stark testament to how medical science can be weaponized for discrimination and unethical experimentation. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service, in collaboration with the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, initiated clinical trials aimed at studying the natural progression of syphilis. 600 impoverished black men were selected to participate in the experiment. They were deliberately infected with syphilis and left untreated in order to observe the disease's evolution, an act that led to the deaths of dozens due to complications, the infection of several spouses, and the birth of children with congenital syphilis. When journalist Gene Heller exposed the details of the story in the early 1970s, it sparked widespread public outrage and prompted official investigations that condemned these inhumane experiments. In 1997, then-President Bill Clinton issued a formal apology on behalf of the U.S. government during a White House address delivered to survivors and families of the victims. Yet, despite the gravity of these revelations, one of the most unsettling strategies under scrutiny remains the concept of pandemic preparedness and response. This strategy has drawn intense skepticism, particularly among those who follow conspiracy theories and global health policy developments. One of the clearest illustrations of this was the event that took place on October 18, 2019, when the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, alongside the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, conducted a simulation of a global pandemic. The exercise was titled Event 201. It simulated the outbreak of a novel respiratory virus transmitted from animals to humans, which then spread globally, causing massive economic, psychological, and social disruption. Participants included high-ranking executives from pharmaceutical companies, media conglomerates, major banks, as well as international security and health agencies. They discussed strategies for managing the hypothetical outbreak, including controlling online information, enforcing global quarantine measures, coordinating lockdowns across nations, and securing supply chains for medications and vaccines. The simulation also emphasized the roles of private sector and media in maintaining a unified official narrative and in securing emergency funding for pharmaceutical companies and health institutions. What stirred controversy was the eerie resemblance between the Event 201 scenario and the actual events that unfolded just months later with the COVID-19 pandemic. The exercise even predicted a projected death toll of 65 million, a figure that later provoked widespread fear as real infection numbers began to rise. As media censorship intensified during the pandemic, alongside vaccine mandates and soaring profits for pharmaceutical and tech giants, a growing wave of suspicion began to emerge. These suspicions fueled academic debate, intelligence reports, and parliamentary investigations, especially in the United States and the United Kingdom. Questions persisted. Was Event 201 merely a drill or a preemptive blueprint? How could the Gates Foundation and the Davos Forum so precisely foresee a pandemic just months before it occurred? And why did the simulation focus so heavily on controlling media narratives? So, was the COVID-19 pandemic a natural outbreak? Or was it a manufactured crisis, as asserted by several intelligence reports that dismissed the official narrative claiming the virus emerged from a natural mutation and was transmitted from animal to human at a seafood market? Others argue it may have accidentally leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, despite it being one of the most advanced laboratories in China and among the very few in Asia operating under biosafety level 4. Researchers have also pointed fingers at the Fort Detrick Laboratory in the United States, a military facility that serves as a central hub for biological warfare research and is responsible for storing and developing lethal viruses and bacteria. In the summer of 2019, just months before the coronavirus outbreak, the lab was temporarily shut down due to concerns over biosafety protocols, raising suspicions about a possible leak. Chinese authorities later invoked this incident to counter accusations against the Wuhan lab, calling for an international investigation into Fort Detrick. Thus, it becomes evident that the primary goal behind a manufacture of disease may not be limited to financial profit, but control. Pandemics instill fear in populations, justify the imposition of authoritarian measures, and restructure economies to the advantage of powerful global forces. Why would dominant powers need tanks and armies when a single virus can shut down the entire world, cripple its economy, enforce emergency laws, and redraw maps of influence? Are you still unconvinced that we are living through a new form of unconventional warfare, one in which people are subjugated not by military force, but by fear, confusion, and an information blockade? Do you still doubt that we are caught in calculated scenarios, fed repeated messages, and ushered into global strategies disguised as salvation and security? Do you not yet see who truly benefits from these relentless crises? And how, with quiet precision, our world has been transformed into a new order governed by forces that serve the agenda of a single rising figure? Then open your eyes, you'll realize we are spinning in a vortex of conspiracies where truth and falsehood blur, leaving the mind lost in a maze of distraction and uncertainty. For instance, look up at the sky and ask about the long white trails left by some aircraft, streaks that slowly spread across the heavens before fading. They'll tell you it's water vapor from jet fuel combustion, which condenses into ice crystals at high altitudes and usually dissipates within minutes. But many scientists and researchers propose another explanation. What you're seeing is not just water vapor, but the residue of a substance called chemtrail, a chemical or biological agent deliberately released from aircraft. Why? What is its link to human mental health? How does it affect soil and crops? And how is it connected to projects like HAARP and the major food corporations poisoning our food supply? In his renowned 2001 book Death in Air, American physician and author Dr. Leonard Horowitz discussed government programs that use aircraft to disperse chemical agents into the sky, substances that directly affect human health, the environment, and climate. He cited official documents and recordings linking these programs to objectives such as population control and clandestine experimentation. Horowitz specifically referred to Evergreen Helicopters, a company funded by the Central Intelligence Agency, which allegedly sprayed millions of gallons of chemicals over U.S. skies and beyond, as part of secret programs conducted on unwitting populations. These programs became known as the chemtrail conspiracy, a term formed by combining chemical and trail. The term denotes a chemical trail in contrast to contrail, which is the condensation trail left by water vapor from jet engines, visible in the sky as thin white lines behind airplanes. However, unlike contrails, which typically dissipate within minutes, chemtrails linger ominously in the atmosphere, breaking down in suspicious patterns, often accompanied by sudden weather shifts. What's striking is that the idea of chemtrails is not mere conspiracy fiction, as often portrayed. It draws support from officially declared programs such as the Solar Radiation Management Initiative. This real government-backed geoengineering project, conducted by universities and corporations, aims to reduce solar radiation by dispersing chemical and metallic particles, like artificial sunshades, into the stratosphere to cool the Earth. The concern, however, lies in a lack of regulatory oversight. Substances like aluminum oxide, barium titanate, and strontium have been shown in studies to have toxic effects on the nervous and immune systems. Despite this, in 2010, the U.S. National Academy of Sciences published a report recommending the expansion of weather modification experiments as part of climate change mitigation. Since then, reports of aerial spraying have increased, especially across the Middle East, often followed by outbreaks of mysterious illnesses or prolonged droughts. In his 2004 book Chemtrails Confirmed, Canadian journalist and author William Thomas presented testimonies from pilots, police officers, U.S. Marines, air traffic controllers, and cargo crew members, all of whom described unusual patterns of unidentified substances being released into the sky. Unsurprisingly, the World Health Organization has remained silent on the issue, and mainstream media avoids addressing it. But independent researchers such as Dr. Nick Begich have provided field and lab evidence of heavy metals found in air and soil samples, materials unlikely to result from nature or normal aircraft emissions. Even more unsettling is the connection between chemtrails and other research centers like the HAARP project, which some accuse of manipulating weather and the Earth's electromagnetic environment. Thus, chemtrails may represent a weapon in an invisible war, a war against nature and against humanity itself. Their risks extend beyond respiratory disease to mood disorders, increased cancer rates, reduced fertility, and the poisoning of crops, leaving populations increasingly dependent on monopolized systems of food and medicine. Speaking of food, did you know that most of what now sits in our kitchens isn't farm-grown, but lab-designed? Agriculture has become a tightly controlled system dominated by colossal corporations that dictate what we eat and how we eat it. Leading the charge is Monsanto, a company synonymous with food monopolization and nature manipulation, driven by motives that likely exceed mere profit. Founded in the United States in the early 20th century, Monsanto has, in recent decades, transformed into a biotech giant monopolizing the genetically modified seed market. The issue isn't just genetic modification, it's the monopolistic policies that accompany it. These modified seeds yield only one crop and cannot be replanted, forcing farmers to buy new seeds from the company each year, along with the matching herbicides and fertilizers, in a cycle of agricultural enslavement. This technology, known as Terminator seeds, has been described as a tool to globally dominate agriculture and impoverish farmers, especially in developing nations. The documentary Food Incorporated shed light on how corporations like Monsanto dominate the market, going as far as to pursue legal action against those who attempt to preserve traditional seeds. Instead of promoting sustainable agriculture, the system encourages industrial farming reliant on pesticides and chemical fertilizers, methods that yield food laced with toxins. Among the most controversial of these pesticides is Roundup, which contains glyphosate, a substance the International Agency for Research on Cancer classified as possibly carcinogenic to humans. However, later systematic reviews and statements from bodies such as the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and European regulatory agencies suggested there was insufficient evidence to prove typical glyphosate use causes cancer. This controversy underscores claims that Monsanto commands a vast political influence network, with former executives rotating between top positions at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration. This phenomenon, known as the revolving door, highlights the collusion between the deep state and multinational corporations and reveals that Monsanto is not merely an agricultural company, but a strategic arm of the emerging global order, one that aims to establish a centralized food system in which a ruling elite programs taste, suppresses immunity, and subjugates populations. As of early 2025, more than 67,000 lawsuits were still pending against Monsanto, brought by individuals diagnosed with cancer. One landmark case concluded in 2018 in California, where a court awarded a historic verdict in favor of a victim, ordering Monsanto to pay $289 million in damages, later reduced to $21 million upon appeal. This ruling set a legal precedent that opened the floodgates to hundreds of other claims, evidence of a long-standing collusion between Monsanto and regulatory agencies like the EPA, which allegedly ignored early scientific warnings about glyphosate due to political and financial pressure. It was also revealed that Monsanto engaged in media manipulation, tampered with scientific studies, through what is now termed bot science, and financed fraudulent research to whitewash its pesticides while influencing policy decisions at the expense of public health. All of this reinforces the belief that Monsanto's products were never intended to enhance agricultural productivity, but to create a global dependency on a polluted food system, fully controlled by unaccountable economic forces and shielded by legal experts skilled in manipulating legislation. In 2018, the German conglomerate Bayer acquired Monsanto in a massive deal worth over $60 billion. Many saw this merger as an attempt to erase the tainted Monsanto name, now synonymous with corruption and suspicion, without halting the underlying practices. Monsanto has become a symbol of a new era, an era where sovereignty is manufactured through food, wars are waged with seeds, and people are enslaved through hunger, fulfilling the adage, "He who controls oil controls nations, he who controls food controls the people." This problem extends beyond agricultural corporations like Monsanto to food manufacturing giants accused of transforming from food producers into disease makers, ensuring ongoing dependence on the pharmaceutical industry on one side and weakening society on the other. These companies package genetically modified foods into appealing products laden with sugar, saturated fats, and artificial flavorings, all directly linked to diseases like diabetes, obesity, digestive disorders, and cancer. Take, for instance, Nestlé, the Swiss multinational and one of the world's largest food companies. With global brands like Kit Kat, Nescafé, Nesquik, and Maggi, Nestlé stands accused of producing food products, over 60% of which are classified as unhealthy. The company allegedly targets developing markets with high sugar, high-fat, preservative-laden products, backed by aggressive marketing campaigns focused on children. It also faces accusations over exploitative practices such as groundwater extraction and exporting modified baby formula to African nations. Similarly, PepsiCo is not only the maker of Pepsi but also owns brands like Lay's, Quaker, and Gatorade. The company is accused of promoting products high in sugar, sodium, and synthetic additives through misleading advertising strategies. According to numerous medical reports, consumption of these products is directly linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases. A third example is the American company Cargill, the world's largest privately held corporation in the agriculture and food industries. Unlike typical food producers, Cargill does not supply food directly to consumers. Instead, it provides raw materials to most other companies and exerts control over supply chains, from cultivation to distribution, making it a central instrument in monopolizing the food system and flooding markets with industrial substances of poor nutritional value. The company is accused of dominating the production of genetically modified corn and soybeans, as well as high-fructose corn syrup, also known as glucose syrup, a major contributor to the global epidemics of obesity and fatty liver disease. These are merely examples of corporations embedded within powerful media networks that promote their products as healthy options, backed by biased or fabricated studies that downplay their risks, mirroring the tactics used by tobacco companies in the past century. This issue was addressed by American journalist and author Paul Roberts in his book The End of Food, where he stated that the global food system has morphed into a massive centralized apparatus driven by profit rather than health or sustainability. He explored the dire consequences of excessive reliance on industrial agriculture. Similarly, investigative journalist Eric Schlosser chronicled in his book Fast Food Nation the rise of fast food culture after World War II, beginning with American diners in California and expanding worldwide. He examined the structural corruption of agricultural conglomerates that impose dominance over farmers, the dangers of foodborne illness due to unhygienic industrial processes, and the overwhelming advertising campaigns that foster early loyalty to fast food, ultimately fostering unhealthy consumption patterns. Together, agricultural corporations, food giants, and pharmaceutical companies form a closed loop. The cycle begins with corporations producing cheap, appealing, disease-inducing food, followed by pharmaceutical companies offering drugs that manage, but do not cure, the resulting illnesses, securing a continuous dependency. In essence, most of our food today is no longer free nor natural. It has become engineered, packaged, and manufactured in labs at the behest of corporations, not harvested from the soil. Much of it is little more than slow-acting poison wrapped in glossy foil. Every meal brings us closer to illness, as its components have likely never passed through a farmer's hands but rather through genetic codes and laboratories. We are no longer eating food. We are consuming the byproducts of complex biological experiments with devastating effects on human health. Numerous studies have linked genetically modified products to autoimmune diseases, hormonal imbalances, fertility issues, and even cancer. One such study was conducted in 2012 by molecular biology professor Gilles Eric Seralini of the University of Normandy. He fed rats for 2 years on genetically modified corn, strain NK603, and found significant increases in tumor size and frequency, as well as liver and kidney damage. Naturally, the study faced harsh criticism from the scientific community due to alleged methodological flaws. It was retracted despite protests from Seralini's team but later republished in 2014. What's more alarming is that genetically modified crops have been integrated into the food supply chains of most countries without consumer awareness. While European populations demand clear labeling for GM products, nations like the United States, Canada, and others refuse such transparency, leading many researchers and citizens to question the very nature of what we eat. Is it real food, or lab-altered substances crafted from scratch, never touched by soil? In recent times, we've seen numerous viral videos showing meats, fruits, and vegetables that appear almost plastic. Are these claims grounded in reality, or are they exaggerated conspiracies? The truth is no longer concealed. A vast portion of meat from industrial farms undergoes food engineering. Cattle and poultry are fed genetically modified grains, growth hormones, and antibiotics to accelerate development. Post-slaughter, the meat is treated with chemicals to preserve color and suppress odor. So, can we still call this meat in the traditional sense? Or is it now a synthetic product, tampered with from its genetic roots to its final packaging? As for fruits, the excessive use of substances such as furfural or sodium nitrate to hasten ripening or enhance appearance transforms them from natural produce into industrial commodities bearing no resemblance to true fruits and vegetables, save for their external shape and a flavor manufactured by chemical agents, many of which pose grave threats to human health. Even more alarming are the persistent claims regarding plastic rice, widely reported in media coverage, especially in India and China. It has been alleged that certain vendors mix natural rice with pellets crafted from recycled plastic or compressed industrial starch. While official investigations have not confirmed the widespread presence of such adulterated rice in mainstream markets, documented reports do exist of seized contaminated shipments and tests revealing that some rice neither burns nor decomposes, melting instead, raising a more disturbing question. What if these are not isolated incidents? What if they form part of a broader scheme to counterfeit nature in pursuit of goals far beyond profit? Goals aimed at controlling health, food, and even the human genome. Worsening this reality is the collapse or infiltration of health regulatory systems in many developing nations where independent laboratories are silenced, and most of these questionable products are funneled into impoverished countries that lack the infrastructure to trace the origin of their food or analyze its composition. This opens the door to nutritional chaos, in which the pressing question of the future may no longer be, is this food? But rather, who made this food and how? Although governments are supposed to serve as guardians of their people, in practice, many appear to protect corporations, even at the expense of public health, functioning as silent partners in a conspiracy steered by money, influence, and electoral promises. This collusion is most evident in matters of health, food, and pharmaceuticals. Regulatory bodies like the U.S. Food and Drug Administration or the European Food Safety Authority often bow to the pressure of lobbying groups and vested interests. Some of the studies submitted to these agencies for product approval are, in fact, funded by the very corporations seeking the licenses, fueling ongoing debates in academic and media circles regarding transparency and integrity. Additionally, the revolving door phenomenon, well documented in both the United States and Europe, highlights how officials routinely alternate between regulatory agencies and senior positions within major food and pharmaceutical companies. One of the most prominent examples is Michael Taylor, who held positions within the FDA, served as a lawyer and legal advisor to Monsanto, and later returned to the FDA as Deputy Commissioner for Foods. This career trajectory sparked widespread controversy about his loyalties, especially given his vocal support for policies facilitating the use of genetically modified crops. Hence, many began to question, can his decisions be trusted? Whose interests does he truly represent? This issue is not confined to the West. Across the Arab world, Africa, and Latin America, corporations exert influence through funding, grants, and collaborative programs designed to market technologies, pesticides, and dietary supplements, despite objections from principled local scientists who are gagged, have their laboratories shuttered, or are barred from publishing. In some cases, the involvement goes even deeper. Investigative reports have revealed secret contracts between corporations and governments to promote vaccines, medications, or genetically modified crops, often containing clauses that shield the companies from legal liability in the event of adverse effects. The COVID-19 pandemic offers a glaring example. Secret agreements were signed between major pharmaceutical firms and various governments, especially within the European Union, as well as countries like Argentina, South Africa, and others. These contracts mandated total secrecy over pricing and deal terms, granted companies legal immunity from lawsuits over side effects, and in some cases, even forced governments to bear the cost of any resulting compensation, relieving the manufacturers of all responsibility. Some vaccines were even provided to certain countries at extremely low cost or free of charge, leading many to echo the proverb, even the hawk does not throw its chicks away for nothing. All of this raises a grave question. Who truly governs global health decisions? Governments, colossal corporations, or both in what is now termed corporatocracy, the rule of corporations? This term is used to describe the domination of multinational conglomerates over political, economic, and social decision-making centers within a state. When money grants the power to shape policy, laws become mere instruments serving elite interests. Human beings are reduced to entries on profit sheets, cogs in a vast legislative and economic machine working in favor of capital, redefining health, medicine, and nutrition based not on medical truths but on commercial advantage. In such an equation, honest science is sidelined, and every voice daring to expose the truth is silenced. Naturally, the media becomes the camouflage arm, its role no longer to reveal reality, but to obscure it. It does not merely withhold the truth. It drowns it in a flood of lies, misinformation, distorted data, and meticulously crafted narratives. Thus, rather than being a conduit for truth, media morphs into a tool for its distortion or burial. Major channels, newspapers, and websites are funded by the same companies that manufacture pharmaceuticals, genetically modified foods, or chemical pesticides. News becomes advertising, investigative journalism turns into covert promotion, and pundits evolve into experts in deception and obscuration rather than enlightenment. In the United States, for instance, pharmaceutical advertising on television networks exceeds $6 billion annually, placing those networks under intense commercial pressure not to antagonize their sponsors. Worse still, aggressive campaigns are launched to discredit anyone who challenges the official narrative. Independent scientists are labeled as science deniers or purveyors of disinformation, and their voices are systematically purged from public discourse. Many physicians and researchers have been deplatformed, had their accounts suspended, or become targets of orchestrated smear campaigns on social media, whether in service of governments, corporations, or complicit media entities. Algorithms are also weaponized through what is known as shadow banning, where posts or videos aiming to educate the public are hidden or their reach drastically reduced, without the content creator's knowledge. This form of soft censorship does not delete dissenting views outright, but buries them into obscurity. Governments, too, through media outlets, often resort to phrases such as pseudoscience, conspiracy theory, or disinformation to strip legitimacy from any alternative discourse that questions or critiques the official narrative. Meanwhile, mouthpieces of the pharmaceutical industry and architects of corporate health policies are given unchallenged platforms, representing the goals of corporatocracy with remarkable fidelity. The COVID-19 pandemic remains the clearest illustration of this media collusion and both soft and at times hard censorship. Entire YouTube channels and Facebook pages were shut down for merely posing legitimate questions about vaccines under the pretext of spreading misinformation, while platforms promoting unproven drugs or concealing known side effects were allowed to operate freely. We are therefore witnessing the manufacturing of an alternative consciousness, one that doesn't inform us of events but persuades us to accept them blindly. When corporations shape the media narrative, the press becomes an appendage of a system that profits from illness and purchases complicit silence. Thus, the threads of conspiracy stretch from the air we breathe to the food we consume, from the pills we take to the thoughts we are allowed to think. Here, silence becomes betrayal, and remaining mute amounts to complicity. Knowledge must become a mission, a transmission of awareness, to liberate ourselves from media guardianship, to search independently, to read beyond the mainstream, and to question everything served to us prepackaged. As we have seen, media can conceal more than it reveals, and mislead more than it enlightens. A return to traditional farming practices and natural seeds emerges as a cornerstone in resisting the engineered industrialization of food. It is worth noting that, in recent years, hundreds of initiatives have emerged across the globe advocating what is now known as food sovereignty, an effort by people to reclaim their right to produce their own sustenance, free from the grip of corporations that enslave them through engineered food systems. These systems deliberately undermine effective health prevention, which begins not with pills, but with lifestyle changes, bolstering immunity through wholesome nutrition and physical activity, understanding the body's role in psychological and physiological balance, and returning to traditional healing methods and alternative medicine without succumbing to the derision often directed at them. Modern medicine, as we have seen, tend in most cases to address symptoms rather than root causes. Therefore, we must reconstruct our understanding of science, health, and credibility through a collective awareness and a society grounded in intellectual independence, one that dares to ask questions and possesses the acuity to critically interpret reality, unmarred by emotional manipulation or censorship. Most crucially, we must grasp that the battle is not merely for the body, but for the consciousness that teeters between those who would reduce us to clients of perpetual pharmacies and those who yearn for us to be free, healthy in both sight and insight, to realize that in this era of overwhelming complexity, illness is no longer a mere biological malfunction. It has become a fully fledged enterprise. An enterprise orchestrated by a vast economic, political, and media machinery, managing pain, profiting from human suffering, and transforming individuals into open markets where lives are measured in profit margins and health and stock shares. This is a meticulously integrated system operating in seamless coordination, from biotech firms to global health institutions, from laboratories to television screens, from education systems to the media, each contributing, directly or indirectly, to entrenching a mindset of compliance with a model of disease management rather than cure. The only path to resisting this all-encompassing dominion lies in the courage to question. For when questions arise, so too does the journey of awareness, no longer a luxury in a time of mental manipulation, but the sole vessel of salvation adrift in a turbulent sea of calculated lies, conscripted media, and education stripped of its essence. Do you still believe that the idea of a global conspiracy is mere fiction or unwarranted skepticism, despite the evidence of elite control over the very threads of food, medicine, and air? How natural seeds were turned into monopolistic tools, vaccines into levers of coercion, and information into instruments of conditioning. Then consider illness not merely as a medical condition, but as a social, political, and economic phenomenon. For when it is deliberately manufactured, it ceases to be a symptom and becomes a message. We either decipher that message and reclaim our sovereignty over our bodies, minds, and consciousness, or we surrender ourselves willingly to those who have mastered the craft of manufacturing disease.